Hi everyone and welcome back to part 5. Today we'll be talking about emotions and how they relate to digestion, as well as the organs and the elements and how they all tie in together. I love this chart because it shows all different emotions and it puts them on a scale of which ones are the most uplifting, which is on the left, up, and which ones drag us down the most, which are the red ones on the right. So emotions in themselves are not a negative thing. Emotions help us change what has to be changed, or on the contrary, they make us appreciate what we value, and it's a journey of self-discovery. The only thing that we don't like about emotions actually is being stuck in them. So as long as we go through them, we feel them, and it passes, and we learn from them, there's really nothing wrong. But being stuck in them, being stuck in a loop, and in general, feeling stuck is always going to make us feel frustrated or have lower self-value, or maybe make us lose our faith. And so it's important to know what we're feeling and to accept it, and as I said, to learn from it. And I'll be talking more about all the emotions in a couple of slides. Now, the way the Chinese see it, and I'm sure that's all over the world, is that our natural state is that of stillness. And we actually shouldn't be feeling emotions all the time. And if we do, we actually get really tired. And so this stillness gets disrupted when there is an emotion coming in. And that's fine as long as the emotion has a purpose and that it's not a feeling of being stuck in it. And once you have that disruption, it may take a while to get back to the stillness. It might take some effort to do that. But it's important to remember to be still. And this is why meditation has become quite a mainstream thing, because we all realize that we're constantly being stimulated and it drags us down. And some people actually only have that stillness when they're asleep, not so much in their waking life. So I wanted to just pay attention to this in the next few days. The emotions we're looking at are going to be the 5 main emotions. They're all connected to our health. This is how the Chinese system works, and that's what I love about it, is that everything is always interconnected. And the emotions are also linked to the 5 main organs, which I'll cover in the next few slides. And each organ/emotion has an element related to it. And so you'll see how everything kind of like fuses together. You have nature, you have anatomy, and then you have human emotion. And it's really beautiful. And it's also not something, it's a lot of information, but it's also quite an intuitive system that I think you'll be able to learn it very quickly because you will feel it. Alright, so the main organs that we're looking at are the liver, the heart, the spleen, the lungs, and the kidneys. I will show you a quick anatomy recap in the next slide, but what I wanted to know for now is just that the liver is responsible for detoxing the blood. The heart is the source of life, it's the pumping of the blood of the life force. The spleen is mostly related to digestion, and the lungs have to do with breathing, obviously, and the kidneys is the flow of water in the body. And this is the most simplistic view of them. And we're going to go into each one in detail and see how there is so much more associated with each organ. For those of you who liked science in school, this might be a quite easy recap. For those of you who are maybe seeing this for the first time in detail, don't worry, you don't have to memorize anything for now, but I just want to go through a very quick scan of the body here. So obviously we breathe in from our nose, the air goes down into our lungs and comes back up to be expelled. That's just the respiratory tract. And then we have, for digestion, we've got food going in through the mouth, down the esophagus, not pictured here, but then into the stomach. And then you have enzymes being secreted from the pancreas, which is linked to the spleen system in Chinese medicine. But the spleen is also responsible for adding things that aid in digestion. And the liver also produces compounds that help digest the fats. And then all this goes down into the small intestines, which are quite long and messy, and then comes out from the large intestine, which goes up, across, and down, and then the food comes out. We also have the kidneys and the bladder, which are responsible for eliminating fluids from the system, and of course, you know where the heart is and what it does. So just to give you like a quick background, if you want to pause on this slide, go ahead. If you want to go into further research, please go ahead. And also what I forgot to mention is the reproductive system, which we will see later on. It's linked to the bladder and the kidneys. And if you're familiar with the chakras, this is the root chakra. Okay, so from here we start getting a bit more techy, and I will do my best to explain this in a way that is simple and logical and not overwhelming. So let's do this. We're starting at the top with the liver. The liver is going to be associated with the wood element, and we're not going to go into any more details for each one. We're looking at the elements only here. And as you can see, there's an arrow pointing from wood to fire, the green arrow, which means that the wood supports or nourishes the fire, because when you make a campfire, you're using wood, right? And then the fire is the heart, and it's very alive and it's very intense. That's why it's red. And this is going to nourish the earth, because when you burn things, the ashes actually go to the earth and they help the earth produce more plants. And so the earth element is the spleen, and as you can see, it's a very nurturing element, because it's like the source of all life, which then feeds the animals and so on. And the earth nourishes, with that yellow arrow, the metal, because earth is the home for the metals, which are usually down, like in underground. Now, the metal is going to support water, and the imagery for this is that actually metal carries water, and this is where civilization has an important role, because we create vessels that carry water, or pipelines, or you see where I'm trying to get to. But like the simplest idea is like imagine a metal container for water and a human carrying it. And then lastly, we have the water, which is the kidney element, and this is going to nourish the wood, because plants need water to live. So that's the easier part. The slightly more complicated part are the dashed lines that are forming a star in the middle, and this is actually representing what cuts what, or what restrains what. So again, starting at the top, we have the green dashed lines that says that wood restrains the earth. So think of like a very dense forest. It gets so dark under the trees that new plants can't grow. So if there's too much wood, actually it's not a good thing. And then we have earth restraining water. So if there's too much mud, the water can't flow clean. And then we have the blue line of water restraining fire. That's pretty simple. If you just pour water over fire, it kills it. And then we have fire restraining metal. Basically, too much fire, metals will actually melt. And lastly, we have metal restraining wood. And this is simple imagery of a saw cutting wood, or a knife cutting a wood. So these are all images that we are very used to. But when we go into the elements, and you'll understand after the presentation that these relations are actually very they're very deep when we look at the emotions behind them, and when we also look, which is very advanced, I'm not going into that, but when we look at a person that has imbalances in each organ, and we'll see how this affects that. So just to give you a quick example, like if you have a liver problem, the liver will affect the heart, which means there could be a lot of anxiety or insomnia, and then this will affect digestion. And so I don't really want to overcomplicate this, but just to give you a quick idea of how they're all linked. Now, we typically start with the liver because it's the wood element and it just creates a nice sequence of flow. But without much ado, let's get into it. We have the liver linked to the gallbladder. They're right next to each other and they're both responsible for like digesting fats, but it goes way deeper than that. So it's linked to the wood element, which means it has to do with growth and flexibility. But here's what happens. When you have, on the good side, you would have self-love and compassion and kindness, but on the bad sides, if there's an imbalance there, there will be frustration, anger, and indecision. The personality that is linked to the wood type would be an overachiever, someone who's stubborn, someone who's stressed. This is me 100%. So, no wonder. Like I've had liver issues, not directly in the liver, but with these emotions my whole life. The body type is usually lean, slim, broad shoulders. And this kind of person, if they have an imbalance, they need to balance it out with exercise to get out that extra energy, deep sleep, and rest throughout the day. Now, the liver will affect other parts of the body. So these imbalances will affect the eyes, typically with dry eyes, nails, tendons, and blood issues like anemia or any toxicity in the blood, which also will affect the menstrual cycle. So there will be some PMS issues if the liver is imbalanced. Now, the flavors associated with this element are sour. So anything sour usually helps keep that person a bit cooler, but also leafy greens. Leafy greens are extremely important. And again, if you remember, this element is green. So this is a little cue for you to remember that. Next, we have the heart, always pictured in red, and the heart is linked to the small intestine. And you'll understand why in a moment. So the negative emotions when there's a heart or imbalance is sadness, anxiety, but also overjoy, because too much excitement in Chinese medicine is actually just as bad as anxiety, even if you're thinking of something positive. But they both make you feel restless, and this is not good for the heart on the long term. On the other hand, the good emotions here are joy, happiness, love, mainly because the heart is linked to the fire element, and fire is life, fire is passion, it's wanting more. And so when you have that zest for life, you usually don't have issues with these two organs. Now, as you might know, when you're feeling anxious, your digestion goes a bit off. And this is the link right here. Now, a fire personality is passionate, fun, spontaneous, typically would have delicate features, but a big smile, and usually hair that you would notice. So it could be curly, it could be big, but there's usually something about that person's hair. When there is an imbalance, you need to rectify this with a lot of relaxation, gentle exercise, meditation. You can see why yoga has become a popular thing, because we are generally an anxious society. So when we do that, it affects not only the heart, but also the digestion. And typically symptoms of imbalance are heartbeat issues like irregularities, insomnia, very intense dreams, and a disturbed psyche. So usually people with psychotic issues or disorders would be treated on the heart channel with Chinese medicine. And the flavor here is bitter, so things like chocolate or coffee or greens help regulate it. Next up is our big star of the show, the spleen, which is usually pictured orange or yellow. And the spleen is linked to the stomach because this is where we tend to digest or our emotions, or actually, as I like to say it, when we are overthinking, and actually we're thinking more than feeling, and that's a very masculine trait actually, to think our emotions rather than feeling them. Digestion gets weaker because the energy is all in your head. And so coming down to the body and being more grounded helps to regulate this channel. And here it's the earth element, so it's all about grounding, which means that when there is balance, then you feel trust, openness, you'll have a strong faith. But when it's out of balance, there will be overthinking and just a lot of worrying. And that kind of throws the body off whack because the energy is really all in the head. Now, these personalities are usually nurturing and compassionate and loyal. The body type tends to be pear-shaped with strong legs. Now, I didn't say this earlier, but we tend to be only maybe two elements. It's very rare to find someone who is really just one element. We tend to be a mix with two dominant ones. And my mix is actually spleen and liver, just to give you an example. So this imbalance can be fixed with yoga, meditation, and warm foods. It will have symptoms that are very common for most people because, as I said before, the spleen issue is a collective thing. So you'll have gas, weight gain, fatigue, a sweet tooth that just doesn't stop making you crave more sweets, loose stools, low appetite, possibly some paleness, and PMS issues. And the flavor here is sweet, but the sweet flavor here does not refer to white processed stuff. It's about the good carbs, the complex carbs, and surprisingly meat. And if you've seen my previous reels and things on Instagram, you'll know that meat is very grounding. Of course, not too much of it, but it's important to remember that. Now we'll be looking at the lungs, and the lungs are related to the large intestine, which is very interesting because you would think that they're so different. Like one is respiratory, the other one is digestive. Like what is the common link here? And it goes back to the element of metal. Metal is a very sharp thing. And in this context, it has to do with letting go and eliminating. So this is why with the lungs, you eliminate old air. And from the large intestine, you eliminate the food that you're not needing anymore, or air also. But basically, we're looking at letting go. And I want to see this as actually it's a very positive thing because you make space for the new. And so the good emotions here would be connection, courage, and openness when that person is balanced or when the channel is balanced. But any imbalance would cause sadness, detachment, and attachment. Now, why am I mentioning these two things? Well, too much detachment pretty much makes you an asshole, but too much attachment will always make you unhappy. So it's important to find that balance between letting go of what you don't need, but also making things that are important, like have a place in your life. So someone who is a very metal person with an imbalance would tend to be very lonely and isolate themselves a lot because of the detachment. But they all tend to be very organized and very disciplined and tidy, so they actually make pretty good leaders. So it's very interesting. But again, it's all about balancing that. And so this person would usually need to cool down with some breathing exercises that help to embrace the new, because with the breath, it's all about letting go of the old and taking in a new one, on and on and on, and to also have a good social life. This person would have sharp features, usually a flat stomach, and might be a bit pale. Now, the lungs have to do with your immunity, which is why when we get a cold, what's the first thing that gets affected is our breathing. Also affects the nose, that's related, and the hair, the skin, and constipation, because the metal element is quite drying. So when there's too much dryness, most likely you're just not breathing enough, and you're slightly constipated because the stool is forced. Now, the flavor here is pungent, which means things that are a bit hot, like garlic, onion, radish. Those are excellent when you have a cold and when you want to raise your immunity. Now, last but not least, we have the kidneys and the bladder. This system is usually depicted as black or blue, and it's linked to the water element. So it's all about flowing, going with the flow, having balance, and also wisdom, because water is actually the most emotional sign. And when this person is not in balance, they will have a lot of fear, a weak willpower, insecurity, and typically any issue with money is felt on that level. It can also be like back pain in the lower back area. not necessarily with the kidneys themselves, but it's always going to be like the lower two chakras. And when that person is balanced, then there is calm, willpower, and safety. The personalities for a very strong water element are people who are creative and self-reflective, typically artists, but not necessarily. The body type would be round with a larger belly. So some people are actually naturally meant to be round. They will have so much, like, a really hard time losing weight. And so you actually have to embrace that if you are a water type. Things that would help you as well is anything that is calming, being near the water or just drinking enough water, and avoiding all kind of stimulants like coffee, alcohol, drugs, because they just really take you off balance. Issues with the kidneys and the bladder would be felt in the ears or memory issues, but also bones and joints and hair, urine, so like urinary tract infections, or issues with fertility, and that goes for both men and women. The flavors that rectify here is salty, so not table salt like we talked about, but eating seafood, seaweed, mushrooms, beans, and the better kinds of salt like rock salt and sea salt and Himalayan salt, etc. Alright, and this is a recap of everything we talked about. You might want to take a screenshot of this. It gives you everything for each element, so the colors, the character, the season associated with it, the organs, the tissues, and the emotions, and then which taste helps rectify that imbalance. As I've said before, we tend to be one or two dominant elements, but of course, any time in our life when something happens, we can actually become a bit more of another element. So we do get triggered. That's human nature. And so there might be periods of your life where you are a bit in like intense fire, even though it's not your nature. So it's important to try to discern between what are you born with and what are you acquiring just through life experience. And once you understand that, you'll be able to take care of yourself better. And I'll be sharing a quiz link with you to know which element you are, just in case you haven't figured it out yet, or if you have some doubts about which one is the most dominant one. Now, I need to make a few notes about some important things. Number one is that IBS is a very easy, quick diagnostic for doctors that literally just means I don't know what's wrong with the patient, but they have a very sensitive digestion system and they might be emotionally challenged, and so I'm gonna write it off as IBS. And I'm really sad to see how many people consider themselves, like, they give themselves that name, but they all have extremely different symptoms. And so basically, IBS to me is not a diagnostic, and it is often wrongly treated. The issue behind it tends to be emotional, and it's reflected in the digestion. And so it cannot be, it's like a big box where we put very different people, and it doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, here in Egypt, I've had clients who came to me who had a digestion doctor prescribed them antidepressants, antipsychotics, literally medicine for schizophrenia when a girl has constipation. It's absolutely insane. And the problem with this is, by the way, more than one example, so many, but the problem is that when you take these medicines, you become addicted to them because they make you feel good and you forget about your digestive issue for some time. But it also affects gut bacteria. It totally throws off the balance. Sorry, there's noise behind me. It completely throws off the balance of your good and bad bacteria. So in the long run, it's quite destructive. Another problem is that for those who don't get treated at all and have a sweet tooth issue, it can also, when you have a sweet craving and you keep feeding it, it actually keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And this also affects your gut bacteria. So I'm not getting too much into bacteria now, but I just want you to know that we really need to correct those emotional and digestive imbalances before they get the most of us. And it's it's really scary how doctors really prescribe things that are quick fixes and they don't fix the root cause. So I really invite you to always look at the root cause of anything. Now, having talked so much about the emotions and organs, there's actually quite little to say about emotional eating, because when we eat, basically, what happens is that we are repressing what wants to be expressed. And let me explain. So we tend to feel our emotions everywhere between our throat and our pelvis. Like, usually we feel emotions in our heart, in our stomach area. Like, this is where we feel the ickiness when like something is contracting us. It feels weird there. And typically we want to express them. So it has to come out from the throat. But the throat, as much as it allows things to go up and be expressed, it's also where we take things. And so when we eat or drink or smoke, you're actually bottling up all the emotions, keeping them down instead of allowing them to be freed. And so when we allow ourselves to feel things and to share things, we actually release ourselves from that. But the instinct to eat when I'm feeling emotional is just a way to like deny it and keep it bottled up. So one little trick I have for you is when you feel that emotion coming up and you're like, oh, I need to just eat that out, eat it away. Just wait 10 minutes, give yourself a bit of time to reflect on it. Maybe you want to write, maybe sing, shake it out or scream it out. And it might not be there anymore, and so the need to emotional eat might not be there anymore. But also, after everything we talked about today, I'll just invite you to revisit these different organ systems and see what emotion is it that you're feeling, why you're feeling it. Sometimes we don't need to know why, but just identify it and try to do the things that are recommended for it. So that could be like just doing some breathing exercises, or maybe going for a walk, or maybe just take a bath. I mean, these things sound really simple, but when we connect with the elements, we connect with ourselves. And similarly, sometimes we don't eat emotionally, but we eat in a way that doesn't allow our body to take in and assimilate food as well as it could. And that tends to do with clean energy. So it's about being too distracted by the mind that we're not in the body. And so how do we correct that? It's with mindful eating. And what is mindful eating? It means eating without being distracted by things, and things tend to distract us through the eyes. So TV is really important to avoid when you're eating. No, especially when you're dealing with negative things like news or sad movies or action movies or like something with suspense and thriller. Like, you might feel it, actually, you will feel your stomach contracting, because we contract to negativity and we expand with positivity. So if you want to watch something, then just watch something really happy and romantic and cute. Similarly, no talking about negative things or things that cause too much excitement. This also has to do with the heart element, and so, I mean, the heart system. And so again, if you want to talk minimally, but try to talk only about positive things. Also, never eat when angry or stressed. As we know, the heart and the small intestine are linked, so when we eat and we have those emotions, you probably won't digest very well, or might digest very slowly and won't feel that great. Also, never eat when standing or moving, just because your body's energy is somewhere else. So your chi is busy doing something else. It's not allowing you to sit, and then the energy can be more in the middle of your body, not in your feet. And to also be conscious of every bite is very important. You eating mindfully, you want to know what you're eating, you want to feel what you're eating. You actually want to enjoy the texture, and that's why texture is such an important part of creating a successful meal, because it's fun, basically, like simple as that. And if you also want to calm down when you're eating, maybe some calm music would help, something instrumental, classical, or just like a lo-fi, maybe something that just makes you feel good. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for listening. I hope it wasn't too much, but again, if you feel you have to revisit this, listen to this video as many times as you need. It's probably going to change a few things in your lifestyle. I would love for you to share that with us on the group. And my homework for you is simply to create a healthy comfort food. So create a recipe that really suits you based on everything we looked at in this presentation and in previous ones too. So, for example, like if you have liver and spleen imbalance and you think you have dampness, then maybe you want to create like something that is a bit drying, but that has flavors that you enjoy. And cheat sheet, you might want to use some of the flavors in the table that I put a couple of slides back. You really want to keep that table handy. And so let's brainstorm together. You don't have to come up with it all on your own, but we can definitely help each other on the group and come up with something that's very suitable for each of us. And then I'll ask you to just take the quiz of which TCM element you are, and I'll also put this in the group. And hopefully that will be very eye-opening, and I can't wait to have a discussion. So I'll see you all soon. Thank you so much.